Yeah, so here's one from Louisa, and I hope I don't mispronounce it. It's Louisa, uh, but I've spoken with her actually in person. I really like having these opportunities to extend what we're saying in a verbal way independently. But this question is starts with a statement. To me, there's a big difference between the academicians called realists and she says, which aren't the true realists according to nature's laws? Question mark. So we can deal with that as a separate question. There seems to be a disconnection with nature in the academic world. The true realists, Boston School types, because they're impressionistic in their approach, are the ones that truly invite the changes of objects as they're being transformed by the constant changes of natural light. The Boston School seems to be the union between what I know and what I truly see. I'd love to learn how to truly see, she says. And I really like the second part. I'm going to try to get into all these things today. The second part is I love the idea of the music of the eye. So thank you for that off suggestion, I guess I should put it, Louisa. Uh, so the academician uh, is a funny word because the academician, the way we probably need to think about it, were simply that group of guys that were being educated by the state for state purposes, for writing, making history paintings. We're talking about now in France, and so they'd make history paintings, or they would be working before that. They would have been working probably for an organization like a church. They would have been doing things for the Pantheon, for example, in Paris. That whole series of beautiful murals there. All of them were decorative, and in those days, the idea of the decorative was it seemed to be mostly based on the idea of circumscribing with an outline objects. The argument was as a way of flattening the thing so it would actually sit on the wall better. Well, that sort of look, that outline-based look, seems to really sort of sum up the academic, but visually. So it's a question of whether that's realism or not. Obviously, you don't see outlines in nature, so how could it possibly be realistic in its treatment? So the realism winds up being the truthfulness of the modeling. And yet, if you're doing like the Apotheosis of Homer by R.A.M, even the modeling is idealized. So again, now you'd say false, and in relation to just truth in front of you. Well, so that's the division. I mean, that's actually the division in all of painting. There are a bunch of people who just like painting what they see in front of them. Portraitists, for example, they're hired to do that. And yes, to do it expressively, to set the models and telling poses. Sargent was probably as brilliant as anybody at making a woman into a statement, with the costume, with the gesture that he would put her in. Those are like fashion statement paintings. Yeah, so you're actually doing all that stuff with your posing. And then you render truthfully with all the skills you have, bringing all the life, all the beauty of the form, and all those the beauty of the color relations all into play simultaneously as you're looking at the scene before you. That's one side. Now that's what we call the impressionist side, and I want to give some credit to Gamel for using that term more broadly, so it doesn't just mean Monet. And again, we go back and refer. I would suggest you look at my video called "Velasquez, the Greatest Impressionist" to get some of the background I'm talking about. It's a video on YouTube. But the other side of the coin is simply, I'd say, essentially an illustrative world. It's a storytelling world. So you have the academicians, they were hired to do a history of X. Well, the history didn't exist, so they had to piece it all together. So the best, most efficient way to do it was to do preliminary drawings, come up with an idea, glue they do these preliminary drawings of figures and buildings and whatever else, and to whatever extent you could, set them up in person and use that information and make as good a likeness as you could, given the difficulties of not having the scene in front of you. I've mentioned before that people like Poussin would use dioramas. They would have models made in clay and that sort of thing to set up, so to get a good sense of the lighting. They weren't the only ones by any means. He wasn't the only one doing that. I've heard that even the Greeks did that. I can't remember where I heard that. So for whatever it's worth, But I don't really want to get into the idea of taking one down at the expense of the other. This is, and I don't think Louisa does either. I think the idea here is to actually say which one of them actually is pursuing truth as we see it, with the idea of drawing forth the beauty of the world as it presents, and making again the music out of that, out of the content that sits just before us. It leads to 2 or 3 other questions that are going to come up in the next couple of these talks. But let me just come back to this question about the Boston School. And so the Boston schools are the ones that, this is Louisa speaking again, truly invite the changes of objects as they're being transformed by the constant changes of natural light. The Boston School seems to be the union between what I know and what I truly see. Well, so it's an interesting question because I don't want to say that, actually. I don't even think Gamma would have made the claim that they were doing like some combination of what they know and what they see. I think he would have said, and I think virtually all Impressionists, including Boston School Impressionists, were telling you that they're just trying to get the truth of what they see before them. Decamp's paint straight and true like a Christian tells me they aren't painting what they know. But on the other hand, if your eyes are informed, let's say if you understand perspective, it's easier to notice when your angles are a little funny in a picture. And on the other hand, the skill of an impressionist is in the innocent eye, is actually getting angles true to vertical and true to other angles, objectively true. And if you really use a good eye and make enough assessments, you will have your perspective right on. On the other hand, the idea of knowing, for example, when you're analyzing the work you just did, I find that the idea of just knowing some perspective, you can actually notice, oh, golly, my perspective is off. How in the heck did I get all those angles out of relation to each other? That's just an example. So let's end this one here today, though, with this the music of the eye, because I think that's what the Boston School is really about. And that pursuit, when you sit before something in nature, the reason you even sat down, shall we say sit? I mean, we typically stand, but as a Boston School painter, doing something small, we do sit. But I find that your breathing is better, your oxygen is better, your brain works better when you're standing. But I don't recommend that. I don't automatically assume that everybody ought to, and that you have to do it in every circumstance. But nevertheless, so the music of the eye, though, what in the world is the music of the eye? One of the things that really is different between the model that I call academic, and again, back to the idea of the difference between Rodin and the kind of sculpture that was happening around him, was the difference between pre-measuring and fixing things in these kinds of I don't want to say mechanically accurate ways. Not that they were more accurate, but the mechanics actually were driving the accuracy. That difference is quite large. And when you start becoming a Boston School type painter, you actually have to find out what colors are doing in relation to each other, what they're up to. And I'm talking about abstractly. At that point, you're entering into the realm that suddenly opens you up to music. And that's a hard thing for most people to grasp. And the only other thing I would say to that is or not the only other thing, but there's another piece when you talk about the Velázquez discussion, and I've mentioned this, I think, maybe on one of these before, but it's worth repeating, and it's worth reading the Velázquez book that was written by R.A.M. Stevenson, that fellow student of Sargent's. And notice that what he's saying is that these guys sat before nature and painted the truth until they found the poetry. And what you will find, pursuing it via the Boston School methods, that you will actually find yourself only able to access the truth by getting to the beauty of what they're doing to each other. If you don't see the play of the beauty, you can't actually bring the accuracy home. You're forced to make the picture more accurate when it fails to make the beauty. But you'll find yourself with efficiencies of all kinds when you begin early and often to start pursuing line and form and all these things from the interplay of line and form, from the interplay of color relations. Just the movement of a red from an orange or red to a purple or red in a series of moves through the reds in a picture is full of music. There are timings, there are spaces, there are size differences between these various masses. And I can only, in that way, allude to the difference between any mechanistic approach that operates from the idea of a nose, the idea of an eye and an ear. Does it look like that ear and that eye? And the exhaustion that you'll suffer before you ever get to where beauty lies, which is the impression, as I said, really modus operandi. It's really his whole entire method for achieving truth. I'll end with one thought, and I just ran into this last week. Again, I mean, I've got 2 or 3 different really nice translations I've referred to before, the Amari Duval, which I am working on electronic copy, so if anybody wants it at some point, I'll send it to you. The Amari Duval, it's called Ang via Amari Duval, and so I have a copy of that. But the other one we don't have is by another Frenchman, and it's the collected quotes from Ang, and I had that translated, and it's a really wonderful picture that matches beautifully the Impressionist mind as we see it in the Boston School, where he talks about the beautiful and the true, the beautiful and the true, the beautiful and the true, and you can't separate them. And that really, really is the key to this thing. And he says painters ought to be musicians. It really helps to actually have the ideas of music in your head. And I don't mean it in the mechanical sense of that word, but the idea of rhythms and timings and just the idea of a sequence of things as in a set of notes, so you begin to see that that the beauty lies in the sets of various things. So thank you, Louisa, for that question. It was really, really, it's the greatest pleasure of my life to have finally grown to a place where do you ever fully understand anything? But where I really see the need and the advantage of approaching things through the music. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Subscribe, like, share, do all those things, and much appreciated. And by the way, thank you also to some of you guys for your generous comments about how much you enjoy these and how much value you think they have. I'll keep doing it as long as you say that. So as long as there's value to one person, I consider it to be worthy. And we're in a wonderful sort of cause together, that in the service of the arts. So thank you again. Next time.